What if the answer to how an 18-year-old died has been sitting in a laboratory this entire time, sealed away, while millions of people argue over a rumor instead? What if the recording everyone believes they understand was never actually the original file? And what if the one voice the internet is desperate to identify was never named by any federal agency at all? Those three questions sit at the center of everything happening in the Nolan Wells case right now. Tonight, a claim is racing across social media that the FBI has identified the voice hidden inside that viral emergency call. Alongside it, another word keeps appearing in comment sections and video titles: strangulation. Two explosive claims. Two words capable of changing this entire investigation. Yet almost no one repeating them has checked what the official record actually contains. We did. We went through every statement released by investigators, every finding announced by the pathologists, every account given by the people who were physically present that day. What we found is a story very different from the one spreading online, and pieces of it have barely been reported anywhere. By the close of this video, you will know exactly which claims survive contact with the evidence, which ones collapse, and which single piece of physical evidence, still locked away from independent eyes, may hold the only real answer left. Before we begin, if you value coverage that separates verified fact from viral fiction, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to True Crime Victims. This case is moving fast. Developments are landing almost daily, and subscribing is how you make sure the next confirmed update reaches you before the next rumor does. Let's start with the recording, because everything else in this story flows out of it. On the afternoon of July 4th, as the boat carrying Nolan's friends began taking on water near the western tip of Horn Island, one of the young men on board placed a call for help.
Nancy Grace would play this.
Detail assistance, Vicky speaking. How can I help you?
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership.
Reporting has identified that caller as a friend named Wyatt Pyron. The call did not go to 911. It did not go to the Coast Guard. It went to Sea Tow, a private company that boaters contact when a vessel is in trouble. That distinction matters, because it tells us how the people on that boat understood their situation in real time. They were dealing with a mechanical failure, and they reached for the service designed to handle one. On the line, the caller told the dispatcher that the bilge pump had stopped working, and the vessel was sinking. The dispatcher walked through standard procedure, asking how quickly the water was rising, how many passengers were aboard, whether there was a membership on file. The young man struggled to keep up with the questions before eventually providing the boat's GPS coordinates. Underneath his voice, the recording captured commotion. Multiple people speaking at once. Movement. Urgency. The unmistakable sound of a group trying to manage a crisis on open water. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources later released that recording publicly. For a while it drew little notice. It was treated as documentation of a boat malfunction, nothing more. In an interesting detail confirmed later, Sea Tow told reporters its crew never actually towed the vessel, because by the time help arrived, the owner said assistance had already been arranged. Everything changed near the end of July, when TMZ obtained the audio, ran it through enhancement, and published the result. Within hours, listeners across the internet were isolating fragments of the background noise, slowing them down, replaying them on loop. Some believed they could hear a voice asking whether someone was dead. Others insisted they heard Nolan's name. Additional interpretations included phrases about checking someone's chest and telling someone to wake up. TMZ itself was careful to state that none of these interpretations had been confirmed, describing them only as what someone in the background might be saying. That caution did not travel with the clip. The interpretations spread as though they were transcripts, reaching millions of people before a single trained analyst had publicly examined the file. Out of that firestorm came the newest claim, the one in this video's title. Posts began circulating, asserting that federal investigators had quietly identified whose voice appears beneath the noise. So let's be absolutely precise about what the FBI has actually confirmed, because the gap between the rumor and the record is enormous. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter confirmed that the FBI is assisting his office by examining digital evidence gathered in the investigation. He also explained why that involvement is routine rather than remarkable. Horn Island sits on federal land, and his department regularly works alongside federal partners in matters connected to it. Separately, the Bureau confirmed to national outlets that it is addressing interstate threats received by individuals connected to this case. Threats that a top Mississippi public safety official said have targeted witnesses, public officials, and even Nolan's own family. Those are the FBI's documented roles. Digital evidence support. The threat investigation. Nowhere, in any official statement from any agency, has a voice on that recording been identified. As of today, the identification claim exists only as an internet assertion, and we flag it as exactly that. Now, here is what has been said by someone who states he was actually there. Warren Hudson, who describes himself as one of Nolan's closest friends, gave a detailed public account in a podcast interview. According to Hudson, the panic captured in that call had nothing to do with any confrontation. It was a genuine emergency. Water was filling the boat, and the group was fighting to keep it afloat while getting back toward shore. Hudson described a specific moment within that chaos, saying a member of the group was urgently shouting for Nolan to get aboard before they had to leave. According to his account, Nolan made his own choice in that moment and stayed on the island, where he had spent part of the day in the company of a young woman. Hudson went further. He said he personally last saw Nolan around 3 in the afternoon, but claims he spoke directly with a person who saw the teenager on the island around 6 that evening, hours after the group departed. He also insisted his friends were far from the last people present, describing dozens upon dozens of boats still surrounding Horn Island as they pulled away. Every one of those statements comes from Hudson himself, and each remains his account rather than an established finding. But notice what his version does. It reframes the viral audio entirely. If accurate, the desperation people heard was a group of teenagers trying to save a sinking vessel, recorded after Nolan had already decided to remain behind. There is a complication inside the friends' accounts, and responsible coverage requires acknowledging it. One version holds that Nolan stayed to continue talking with a 19-year-old named by the Daily Mail as Katie McCormack. Her sister has reportedly pushed back on that framing, saying Nolan was prepared to leave with the group. A former FBI agent analyzing the case, Jennifer Coffindaffer, offered a possible resolution, suggesting the two versions may both be true and simply describe different moments in the timeline. The conflict is real. It is documented, and it remains unresolved. What it is not, under any official finding, is evidence of wrongdoing. No one from that boat has been accused of anything by any authority. The sheriff has confirmed all 3 friends were interviewed and cooperating, and more than 60 witnesses have now spoken with investigators. Which brings us to the moment the viral theory met forensic science. A digital forensics expert named Robert Freed did what no one amplifying the enhanced clip had done. He obtained the recording originally released by Mississippi Marine authorities and measured it directly against the version TMZ published. His findings were striking. The enhanced file ran a full 20 seconds longer than the source. Its digital fingerprint was entirely different, meaning the viral version had been processed in ways that separated it from the original material. When he listened for the phrases the internet swore it could hear, he could not corroborate a single one. Not the question about whether someone was dead, not the name. None of it held up against the authentic file. Freed also raised something that had gone almost completely unreported. The recording released to the public had already been redacted before anyone outside official channels heard it, with account numbers, phone numbers, and identifying details stripped out. In other words, the true, untouched original has never been made public at all. He offered one more observation that explains how this entire controversy caught fire, admitting that once he heard what others claimed was in the audio, his own mind began reaching for those words too. That is how suggestion works on the human ear. Tell someone what to hear, and they will start hearing it. So pause and take stock of where the audio storyline actually stands. A theory carried to millions was built on an altered file. A first-hand account from someone present describes an emergency unrelated to any harm against Nolan. A federal identification claim exists without a single official source behind it. When the loudest explanation in a case fails examination this thoroughly, the honest question shifts. It stops being about a few seconds of distorted background noise and becomes about what the verified physical evidence says. That is where the second word from this video's title enters, and where this case takes its most serious turn. 2 autopsies have now been performed on Nolan Wells. His family still does not have an answer from either one. To understand why, go back to the day his body was recovered. On July 6th, after a National Park Service ranger found him along the island's northwestern shoreline, the Jackson County Sheriff's Department released a statement declaring that no foul play was suspected. That declaration went out before any autopsy had been conducted. A former Mississippi Public Safety Commissioner later observed that authorities began on the wrong foot by publicly ruling out possibilities, while the investigation had barely started, and he noted that this early misstep is part of why the family sought an examination of their own, pointing to a long-standing distrust of official death investigations within black communities. The state performed the first autopsy. Those results have never been released. The Jackson County coroner, Bruce Lind, has said the official report remains unfinished, while the medical examiner's office waits on toxicology. Whatever that examination found, it stays sealed. The family arranged a second, independent autopsy, funded by former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, and performed in Washington on July 10th by Dr. Roger Mitchell, a board-certified forensic pathologist who serves as president of the National Medical Association. On July 22nd, family attorney Ben Crump announced the preliminary findings. Cause of death, undetermined pending investigation. Manner of death, the same. The report documented marked decomposition after days in the water. It identified no fractures and no deep tissue injuries. It did note one physical finding, an area of red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of the head, though the report drew no conclusion about what caused it or whether it played any role in his death. Then came the finding that changes how you should hear every strangulation headline in this case. During the first autopsy, following what the report described as common forensic pathology practice, organs were removed from the body, including the brain, along with portions of the neck and throat. By the time Dr. Mitchell conducted his examination, that tissue was not available to him. His report stated plainly that he could not rule out injury to the neck as a contributor to death, or its cause. He could not determine whether Nolan was conscious or unconscious when he entered the water, whether he went in forced or unforced. The level of decomposition, he wrote, could itself conceal bruising on the skin, especially during a second examination. A former medical examiner, Dr. Michelle Dupré, explained the significance in the starkest terms. The missing neck structures, she said, are precisely what a pathologist needs to make a determination about possible strangulation. She called the second autopsy's results equivocal and acknowledged that while the original pathologist likely retained the tissue for further study, its absence hampered the independent review and prevented real conclusions. Understand what that means for the question in this video's title. Strangulation has never been found in this case. It has also never been ruled out. It exists in a suspended state, unanswerable, because the one piece of evidence capable of resolving it, the retained tissue from Nolan's own throat, has never been independently examined. That is the evidence sitting locked away, while the internet argues over audio. Meanwhile, prosecutors have sent this case to a Mississippi grand jury, which will decide whether anyone faces charges, and the district attorney has confirmed the evidence will remain shielded from public view until those jurors review it, which makes what happened this week so significant. At the National Urban League Conference in Nashville, the family's legal team announced 3 moves that aim directly at every unanswered question we have covered tonight. They have hired some of the nation's leading audio engineers to analyze the complete CETO recording obtained from officials, replacing viral speculation with professional analysis. They are consulting oceanic engineering experts to test whether the tides genuinely align with Nolan's body being recovered near the location where he was reportedly last seen. And they intend to coordinate with the pathologist who performed the first autopsy to finally examine the retained throat tissue, the exact evidence at the heart of the strangulation question. Standing before the cameras, Nolan's mother spoke of 27 days without hearing her son's voice. 27 days without holding him. 27 days of asking one question no official has yet answered. What happened to her child? In the next part, we follow each of those 3 investigations. Examine the reported witnesses who claim Nolan was seen alive after the boat departed, and break down what the grand jury's sealed review could mean for everyone connected to that island. The verified record is growing, and we will be here for every confirmed piece of it. If this breakdown gave you clarity, the headlines never will. Hit that like button right now, subscribe to True Crime Victims, and turn on notifications, because the truth in this case is coming out one document at a time, and you deserve to hear it the moment it does. How does a conclusion get announced before the science that produces it has even begun? What happens to a family when 2 separate examinations of their son's body both end without an answer? And why does the single piece of material capable of settling the most serious question in this case still sit inside a government building, preserved, catalogued, and unreleased? Those questions have no comfortable answers, and almost no one covering this story has been willing to walk through them properly. Tonight we will, because the second half of this investigation is not about a viral recording. It is about paperwork, procedure, and one specific decision that has left everyone outside the state system guessing at something that has, in all likelihood, already been observed by someone inside it. We pulled the documents. We tracked down what independent forensic pathologists, with no connection to this case, have said publicly about the findings. We examined the one word from an early search email that hardened into a public verdict, and we found the expert who quietly explained why that word may not mean what nearly everyone assumed. What follows is the part of the Nolan Wells story that the headlines skipped straight past. If you want coverage that reads the actual reports, instead of the comment sections, smash that like button now and subscribe to True Crime Victims. Every piece of this case is being released in fragments, and we are tracking every fragment as it lands. Return to July 6th for a moment, because the sequence of that day explains everything that followed. Nolan's body was recovered from the shoreline, and on that same day, the Jackson County Sheriff's Department told the public that no foul play was suspected. That message went out before a pathologist had opened the case, before tissue had gone under a microscope, before toxicology had been ordered, let alone returned. Whatever the intention behind it, the statement was structurally impossible to support at the moment it was made, because the examinations designed to determine such a thing had not yet occurred. It was an answer delivered ahead of the process built to produce one. For the family, that ordering of events was disqualifying. Within days, they retained attorney Ben Crump and arranged a second examination entirely outside state control, performed by a pathologist of their own choosing. That choice was not accidental. Dr. Roger Mitchell is board-certified in forensic pathology and serves as president of the National Medical Association, the oldest and largest organization of black physicians in the United States. He has held the position of chief medical examiner himself, which means he has stood on the other side of this exact process, making the same procedural decisions the state made here. The family did not select a critic of the system. They selected someone who has run one. Mitchell conducted the independent examination on July 10th in Washington, 6 days after Nolan disappeared and 4 days after his recovery. It was funded by former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick. On July 22nd, standing beside Nolan's parents at a national convention in Chicago, Crump read the preliminary result aloud. Cause of death? Undetermined pending investigation. Manner of death? Identical. That word deserves genuine attention because it is being misread constantly across social media. Undetermined is a formal classification in forensic pathology, and it carries a narrow meaning. It does not indicate that nothing happened to Nolan. It does not classify his death as accidental. It does not eliminate any possibility, and it certainly does not clear anyone of anything. It states one thing only: the evidence available to that examiner was insufficient to support a conclusion in any direction. It is a declaration about the limits of what could be seen, not a verdict about what occurred. So why was the evidence insufficient? The answer comes down to sequence and access. By the time the case reached Mitchell, the state had already completed a full examination. He was not beginning with an intact starting point. He was working with what remained afterward, and during any first autopsy, a pathologist may retain specific material for continued study by that office. According to reporting on his findings, retained items included internal organs and portions of the neck. Those neck structures are the entire issue. In his written report, Mitchell documented that the tissue a pathologist relies upon when evaluating injury to that region had not accompanied the case to him. He was measured about it. He noted that retaining such material is a recognized and common forensic practice, particularly when there is reason to examine an area more closely. He made no allegation of concealment. He recorded what was in front of him and what was not. Then he wrote the sentence that has driven every headline since. He could not rule out injury to the neck as a contributor to, or a cause of, Nolan's death. He also could not determine whether Nolan was conscious or unconscious upon entering the water, or whether that entry was forced or unforced. Crump described that condition, the state Nolan was in before he entered the water, as the central issue in establishing any cause of death at all. Forensic professionals with no stake in this investigation have since explained publicly why the missing tissue matters so specifically. A former medical examiner appearing on national television stated that those exact structures are what a pathologist depends on when assessing whether strangulation played a role in a death, and that without them, a second examination is inherently limited and cannot deliver conclusive results, regardless of how careful the rest of the work is. A separate forensic expert, quoted by CNN, addressed the same territory, noting that if the state examination did find trauma to the front of the neck, such trauma could originate from blunt force injuries, and he named strangulation as one possibility within that category. Now hold on to what those specialists actually said, because this distinction is the entire point. Neither declared that strangulation occurred. Neither claimed the evidence supports that conclusion. Neither accused a living person of anything. What both described, in careful professional language, is that the one category of material capable of answering the question definitively was unavailable for independent review. According to the reporting on Mitchell's findings, that material has not been destroyed or misplaced. It remains preserved within the state system, retained rather than released, which produces the strangest reality in this entire case. The answer to whether there is any sign of injury in that region very likely already exists in observable form. It simply has not been shared with anyone attempting to establish the truth from outside official channels. There was a second physical finding in the preliminary report, and it has generated its own separate conversation. Mitchell documented an area of red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. He was disciplined about how he characterized it. No fractures were identified anywhere on the body. No deep tissue injuries were found. He described the origin of the discoloration as unclear and declined to speculate beyond that, noting elsewhere in his report that advanced decomposition can obscure whether bruising is present on the skin at all, especially during a second examination. Legal commentator Nancy Grace, reviewing the same finding on her program, drew attention to the fact that the discoloration appeared localized rather than distributed in the pattern one would expect from blood settling after death, and she noted that the independent pathologist did not receive Nolan's lungs or throat. She was equally clear about her own limits, stating outright that she does not know what caused his death, and acknowledging that numerous accidental explanations remain available. That is where the physical evidence stands. Not a confirmed cause. Not a confirmed injury. A documented finding without an explanation, and an absence sitting precisely where the explanation should be. Which brings us to the narrative that spread in the opposite direction, and the correction almost nobody heard. Through a public records request, ABC News obtained an email sent on July 5th by Mississippi Marine Patrol during the active search for Nolan. It was a routine document, listing his physical description and basic details for searchers combing the island. Within it was a note that witnesses had told investigators his alcohol intake that day had been heavy. Additional documents obtained by the outlet included a police report stating that several friends who traveled to the island with him told authorities he was in the company of an unknown female and chose to remain there when they departed, and GPS data showing the boat set out for Horn Island at 9:56 that morning. The word heavy did what single words do online. It escaped its context instantly. It was a preliminary note, recorded during a search, sourced to witness statements, written before any toxicology had been performed. For a substantial portion of the public, it nonetheless became a complete explanation, a tidy way to close the gaps the investigation had not yet filled. Forensic science does not permit that shortcut, and a board-certified pathologist explained exactly why on a Mississippi News broadcast. Dr. Judy Malinek, President and Chief Executive of Pathology Expert Incorporated, has no affiliation with this case, no relationship with either legal team, and nothing riding on how it resolves. Asked to walk through the preliminary findings, she addressed something virtually no other commentator touched: what a toxicology report can and cannot establish once time has passed since death. When a body begins to decompose, Malinek explained, particularly when it is not recovered promptly, bacteria within it can generate alcohol in the bloodstream on their own. That production has no relationship to anything the person consumed while alive. Her point about this case was precise. If the pending toxicology report eventually shows a small quantity of alcohol in Nolan's system, that figure cannot be accepted at face value as evidence he had been drinking before he died. It may reflect bacterial activity after death instead. The findings, she said, have to be interpreted against how advanced decomposition already was at the time of the first examination, or they will be read wrongly. One interview on one local station, containing the context that a nationally circulated word never carried with it. So here is the complete ledger tonight, with every claim placed where the evidence actually puts it. The assertion that federal investigators quietly identified a voice within that recording remains unsupported. It has not been confirmed by the FBI, by the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, or by any named official in any agency connected to this investigation. What has been established through independent forensic analysis is that the version of the audio that shaped public opinion was not the untouched original file, differing from its source in both length and digital signature. The material capable of resolving the most serious open question in this case remains inside a state facility, retained rather than released. The state autopsy report is unfinished. The toxicology results are pending. The case now sits before a grand jury that will decide whether anyone faces charges, with the district attorney keeping the evidence sealed until those jurors have reviewed it. No one has been charged in connection with Nolan's death. Nothing about this case has been classified as a homicide by any authority. 2 examinations, one by the state and one independent, have both stopped short of a determination, and what Nolan's family has requested from the beginning was never a verdict announced ahead of the facts. It was the opposite. It was access to the evidence that already exists, sitting in official files at this moment, finally placed in the hands of people still trying to understand what happened to their son. This case is not over, and neither is our coverage. The sealed state report, the retained material, the full toxicology findings, the results of the audio and tidal analysis the family commissioned this week, every one of those is still coming. If you want to know the moment any of it becomes public, hit like, subscribe to True Crime Victims, and switch on your notifications, because we will break down each piece the instant it surfaces, exactly as the record shows it, with nothing added and nothing assumed.